researcher and a visionary administrator. His journey through the corridors of higher education is a remarkable testament to dedication, excellence, and unwavering commitment to the cause of learning and institutional development. Professor Nagaraju sir hails from Chhatrapur in the Gajapati district of South Odisha. His academic career has spanned various prestigious institutions, including his role as a professor of English at the Central University of Karnataka, which is also his parent institution. Prior to joining EFLU, he served as a Vice-Chancellor of Nagaraju University, Sambalpur, Odisha, where he led initiatives aimed at academic excellence, inclusivity, and community engagement. His contributions in English literature, especially in the field of eco and indigenous literatures, poetry, and post-colonial studies have been widely recognized. Over the years, Professor Nagaraju sir has published scholarly works, supervised numerous research scholars, and participated in reputed international academic forums, including the South Asian Literary Association in Seattle, USA, and the Modern Language Association in Glasgow, UK. His experience also includes roles as an academic advisor at Adhikari Nannaya University, visiting faculty at Sri Satya Sai University, and an instrumental tenure at Rajiv Gandhi Central University, Arunachal Pradesh, where he contributed significantly to building the institution and fostering a national ethos in the northeastern region. What truly sets Professor Nagaraju sir apart is his forward-looking vision. He is well versed in the new education policy and the evolving dynamics of the knowledge economy. His belief that education is a public good enriched by cultural values, pedagogical diversity, and inclusive practices aligns perfectly with the mission and ethos of EFLU. We are confident that under his leadership, EFLU will reach new academic heights, expand its global footprint, and deepen its engagement with multilingual, multicultural, and interdisciplinary discourses that are critical in today's world. On behalf of the occasion of Hope Jubilee celebrations, workshop on role of National Education Policy 2020 in Swarna and Viksit Bharat 2047, a warm welcome to Professor N. Nagaraju sir to give a valuable speech. Thank you.
Thank you for the introduction. I think you had such an engaging session with Madam Santustri and the Honorable Vice-Chancellor JNTUK, whom I also happen to know. But the immediate context was Madam was to be there with us in the Central University Vice-Chancellor's Conference. Madam and me and South Asian University we were put together to look into the internationalization of NEP. But I think Madam chose to go with Bharatiya Jnana Parampara, so she could come. But I'm very happy that I could meet her here. Honorable Vice-Chancellor, JNTUK, Kakinada, Honorable Vice-Chancellor, Andhra University, whom I had met recently. I'm glad that you are around. And the person who brought me here, Professor Srinivas Kumar, and other very distinguished alumni of this very well-known university, technological university of Andhra Pradesh. And I first thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity to be with you. I'm going to do a small presentation about pathways of NEP. That's what I'm asked to do. And my presentation will be what this Amritkal and Viksit, and then the concepts that underpin and national education policy, including the two important source documents from UNESCO and Incheon Declaration. And the other one I just thought would add to capacity building of teachers. How NEP badly or rather essentially depends on the capacities of the teachers to make it effective. You see, Amrit Kaal, very interestingly these days, these two words we are, keep doing a lot of circulation. One is Amrit Kaal and the other is Viksit. And these are mostly, we need to understand them in a metaphoric way because we have 4.3 crore students and maybe more than that youth. We are a young nation. And this young nation, in a world civilization and a young nation, and this young nation is supposed to follow certain examples, very, very bright examples set by Germany, Japan, Korea, Singapore, who have, when their population was young, they registered substantial growth and they became developed economies. They became some of them became what you call the tiger economies. And around this time, India takes clue from these developed nations to make or to leap into that category of developed nations, and that is the reason why the current times, when the young population is get going and infrastructure is ready, we call that period as Amrit Kaal. And this Amrit Kaal, like all times, all kalas, they don't last long. There is a time for that. And that time likely to end by 2047, our 100th year of independence. And by that time, Honorable Prime Minister sets the goal that we should be Viksit, we should be developed, we should join the Committee of Nations who are characterized as developed nations by view of their cultural, geographical and economy. So this is what is important. But just let's see the gap. The second part of the slide explains that. Right now, how do you join them? Just because we want to join, we need to develop. And for that development, we need workforce. But this workforce, the skilled workforce, compared to those developed nations who have used the youth, we have only 5.4 workforce which has got permanent skilling. Whereas those nations which have moved into the development after the Second World War, you will see particularly South Korea, you will see that it is 96% workforce is formally skilled. And Germany 75. Germany and South Korea for us are very important. And I'm from EFLU University. We are getting the embassies to EFL asking for trained workforce. Government of Telangana is signing an MOU with us to train 2,000 health workers in Japanese and Germany, because that is the amount of minimum requirement. I don't know about JNTUK, I'm sure you must be having also similar, requests from other organizations. That's one. The second thing is the gross expenditure and in research and development. We are apt to spend 1%, whereas the developed nations like Germany and South Korea, they have more than 3%. Even China, it has 2.4%. The third point is scientific professionals. Madam was just telling about JNU, the scientific, schools of science. In India, we have 260 scientific professionals for 1 million. Whereas in China, it is 1,000 per million. And in other countries like South Korea and all, it's much, much more. So NEP, when it started with this goal of meeting the leadership requirement. Leadership requirement are the goal, using the golden or Amrit Kaal, the advantages, the infrastructural base that we have built so far. This it wants to exploit and make it Viksit by 2047. Next. This is one, the first thing. The second, I would like to give you a couple of conceptual issues. One conceptual issue is that education, because of the skill requirement and all the current scenario, has conceptually moved away. The higher education system that we are following, it has its origin in 19th century. And in the 19th century later part, Germany gave a model of which later Europe and other Asian countries followed. And there the education is basically, the liberal definition of education is developing the human potential to the fullest extent and making use of making that potential to the social development. But now you can see the definition. It is no longer that liberal conceptual definition, but the definition has changed to, education is a locus of intergenerational transformative dialogue. This definition comes from the UNESCO report. They have issued one report which is called New Social Contract, or Reimagining Our Futures by making the education futuristic. So this definition is what holds key for new education policy. The intergenerational dialogue and exchange. And you have three issues there. One is cycle, second transmission, third co-creation. So when we do the education, who do we impart the education? It is the next generation, the teachers that we do. And the next generation, when you are imparting education to the next generation, you have to include them, you have to bring them on a collaborative platform so that education or educating the youth becomes a collaborative effort. And when in a fast changing world like this collaborative endeavor takes into consideration a couple of things which the new generation wants. And that is where probably the new education policy talks about. And I am using two sources for our NEP. One is this. The other one is the World Commission report on climate change and 17 sustainable goals. I think all of you know about the 17. These three sources underpin our new education policy. These three sources underpin our new education policy. If you see the text, the 66-page text of new education policy, and read these sources, the new social contract, and we will find that there is a huge lot of common ground that is being done. So Kasturi Rangan and his team has taken the initiative, but why did they take this? This is because they have given, this report talks about the future of the world, the future of the learning possibilities. And what should we do first to keep our learning in consonance with sustainability? And there it tells the two things we need to do. One, there is a substantial amount of educational experience, educational focus should go to skills. The second, the pedagogical forms and the pedagogical strategies they should also be taken into consideration. The old pedagogies, the old pedagogical structures and forms will not serve the purpose of education, where a new generation is coming, willing to learn, and they have to learn in requirement with the sustainability, the sustainable sources. That is very, very important. We can no longer think of sources as in an extractive way. Rather, we have to move the sources, use of sources in a sustainable way. The reason why there are certain things are written in pedagogy. First, you will see cooperative work, individual studies, seminar dialogue, community projects, and other such things you need to infuse into the pedagogical forms. When we say community, in this report, you will find time and again they talk of community. And so far in education, liberal education, we have seen it is the individual consciousness, it is the individual potential that they used to talk about. But now, the individual potential has to be located along with the community requirement and the community project. So our pedagogies, our curricula must address this. It should be along with the community, it should be along with the projects, and it should be along with the problems that we face. So the pedagogy and the curricula must be completely overhauled to look into this. And one of the, yes, next sir. Yeah. Next is the knowledge commons. When we are revising these pedagogical forms, one thing we should remember is global knowledge commons that are available to almost everybody who has some idea about the speed of internet. And here he talks about one thing. Most of the pedagogies, most of the curricula, sometimes they do not speak accurately. Sometimes they occlude certain information. And what is that they don't speak accurately, and what is that they don't talk? Say, first, there is one example given there, and that talks about how sometimes governments, in terms of ecological, importance, they don't give accurate information to the society, particularly those projects which do harm ecologically or which have negative impact on ecology. So that kind of occluded knowledge is what makes some sections of society differentiated and marginal. And here they talk about this has to be stopped. In other words, every citizen in a community, every citizen in a society needs to have access to accurate knowledge. And then they talk about scientific literacy. Scientific literacy means particularly those communities, those marginal communities, disenfranchised communities do not have accurate access to knowledge, access to scientific knowledge. The reason why they remain occluded, they remain marginalized, and those societies need to be given the chance. And then he talks about indigenous language. There are three languages we talk about here. One is plurilingualism, indigenous languages, and sign languages. I think India is a linguistically plural nation. All of you know that, I will not elaborate. But what is indigenous knowledge? If you see that, I have worked a couple of projects with tribal communities, the indigenous communities. And you will see the indigenous communities, when India went for linguistic states, and mostly in 20 odd languages we have made the constitutionally recognized languages. But in small states like Northeast, you have more than 200 languages. And in Andhra Pradesh, where sizable tribal communities, Andhra Pradesh, Orissa, Bihar, those languages were yet to recognize and develop. So these indigenous languages, which are also in certain ways repositories of knowledge, we have, occluded them, we have removed them. But the UN report says these languages need to be recognized because the indigenous communities' knowledge, they are the resource for the community. They are the repositories of that community's, cultural heritage. So we need to recognize indigenous languages. The other thing is sign languages. It is very, very interesting. In my previous institution, I appointed one professor as a professor of practice, primarily for one reason. She is an expert, a doctorate from Birmingham University, who did extensive work on sign languages. And she told me one thing important. And what is that? So, these special needs, students with special needs, some can't hear, some are, can't speak. And we call them, we use those derogatory words like deaf, dumb and all that. And she tells, we call these people deaf and dumb, and they call you illiterates. And how do you call them illiterates? Because they know sign language and you don't know sign language. And sign language is one thing, probably in institution, I think yours is one of the oldest institutions in modern India, and mine too. They're all started from Nehru's era. But how many of us know sign languages? I think, Honorable Vice-Chancellor, JNTUK, my appeal to you is that All India Association of Universities have circulated an elective in sign languages. And the sign languages in some universities in the Northeast, some universities have introduced. And EFLU, University of Hyderabad, is also introducing that language. And sign language, it is important that we know the sign language of those students with special needs. Until we know how do we do justice to their presence, how do we accept them as one of us. So this aspect probably in the time for educational institutions like yours and mine to adopt the sign languages, at least as an elective paper, if not, minor. So this is one important thing. The other thing I would like to talk about is decolonization. You see, I think those of you in language teachers, you use decolonization very frequently. The first seed of decolonization was started by the British in the following way. What they have done, they have excluded the knowledge traditions of all colonized societies. Wherever they went for colonization, they have excluded the knowledge society, traditions. That happened badly with India. That happened badly with Egypt and several other states. And excluding the knowledge traditions and imposing the alien British traditions is first colonizing effort. Okay, and I will give you one example there. All of you might have known about wood steel. Delhi University Vice-Chancellor Professor Dinesh Singh gave some youth project to a group of researchers, asking them to develop wood steel, an ancient form of steel, wood steel, which is used mostly in Tamil Nadu. And he has given them 5 years of time and substantial amount fund. But after 5 years they came back, sir, those houses, those groups of people who used to do wood steel, they are all disappeared. There is no such, we couldn't trace a single thing. So this is a disappearance of a knowledge tradition. I am giving an example. And such traditions, including cultural sphere, British have successfully obliterated. Right now, when we are talking of Bharatiya Jnana Parampara, one of the struggles that government is facing, one of the struggles that group of Indian scholars facing is they are not able to connect back to those traditions. There is a substantial gap, and that gap is too tough and too long to be covered. I think only time will tell how we will bridge that gap. So this is one of the important aspects when we are talking about decolonization. The decolonizing effort we are touching 47 when by Viksit. Will you be completely decolonized by that time? Will you be completely national and indigenous by that time? That is one of the aspects NEP tries to aim at. That is one of the aspects NEP tries to aim at. Let's see how it will unfold. Next. Yeah, this diversified, this decolonization, that's what I talked about. The diversification in pedagogics, diversification in pedagogical forms is very, very important. And this also is one problem we have not been able to. I will give you one more example about this problem of, phase we talk about decolonization. You must have heard about a very famous writer, Nobel laureate, V.S. Naipaul. V.S. Naipaul, in his autobiography, at one point, he tells, he was supposed to be the finest writer of an English sentence. One critic tells him, Naipaul is one of the finest writers of the English sentence. Such good was his command of English. And then, Naipaul, one of the writers tells, he quotes Naipaul. Naipaul used to always read by the side of a window. There is a small bed, he used to lie on that and read. And by the side of that window, there is one small flower. He is from Trinidad, the West Indian, And that flower, a white flower, he said, he never recognized. And he used to read a poem all the time. A poem by Wordsworth called Daffodils. And daffodils you don't find in India. Daffodils you don't find in India. And he would always tell daffodils, the color of the daffodils, the shape of the daffodils, he would think about. And he has no idea, no experience of seeing and at least holding in hand a daffodil. But he thought about daffodil, whereas the flower just by the side of the window, the white flower, the native white flower in Trinidad, he never could recognize. And this is what colonization has done to our imagination. So when we are talking about diversified pedagogies, the population diversity, the community diversity, the huge linguistic diversity, that must come into our pedagogies. Only then enough of decolonization can take place. So, and this is again not in India that we are talking about. This is one of the UN reports that is telling us how to widen, how to diversify the pedagogy so that the learner gets the competency to develop himself and relate to the community. This is what very important he talks about. And then inquiry-based action research, all these things go into our NEP. Yeah, next. The next is state. Does state see education as a public good or not? This is one aspect, probably what the UN report tells, but NEP, one of the clauses it tells, they want to develop the private universities too equally, and private universities have been given access to funds also. This is probably slightly a divergence from this report, and we'll see how that works. If you see the NEP, first time, I'm going to show you the slide, the development of this. The first time, NEP addresses from nursery to the doctorate. First time, it looks at the entire education spectrum and sees how the fragmentation and the segmentation that has been the bane of Indian education, it tries to address that. The fragmentation is the reason why it starts from school, nursery to the higher education. And here, I think many of you know how by developing the frameworks, we have developed at least 3 frameworks. And the skills framework, the qualifications framework, and the credits framework. All of them look into 2 aspects. How education must unite, bring together the vocational stream as well as the other mainstreams. And the skills, vocation, and the mainstream, how to unite. So the levels that we are talking about, the credits that we are framework that we are talking about, and also the skills. If you see the skills qualification framework, there are so many skills centers that have come up, councils, skill councils, and all those students, whenever they want to come to mainstream, that levels institution can include them. So here is an effort made to unite diverse strands in higher education. That's one. The second thing is how does the skilled student also gives a thought to the mainstream? Why does he come to the mainstream? What was his purpose? And that is, at the end of the day, what we need to do is the sustainability. That aims at the sustainability is the aim. Both these streams should unite and strive for. And sustainability is a bedrock for the NEP. Why is it a bedrock? Because so far, most of the countries have realized how resources, particularly natural resources, are dry. And in its place, what is that we are leaving the future generations, and how do we address the needs of the future generation? And last part, the development, sustainable development, that definition is given, and there are 2 basic concepts that definition holds forth. One, the needs, the other is limitations. And the needs and the limitations, the skill force must take into account. The skill force must take into account unitedly. So this combination of, uniting the fragmented aspects of higher education, bringing them together so that they address the resource management, they address the futuristic needs of the country unitedly. It's not necessarily that one goes the other way and, mainstream goes quite in another way. So this is another aspect. Just next. Yeah, this digital learning space. I think in higher education, digital learning is a huge thing, and the digital learning, right now what we are telling is the government is not playing enough role in the digital education. In other words, actually the business models that are governing the digital space, those digital space are managed by the multinational firms or bodies like Google and Alphabet and all. And they say it has to be, once government treats education, particularly higher education, as a public good, it has to address that. It cannot leave the digital space, the digital technologies to the private players. And that could land higher education in a precarious situation. Okay, next. Yeah, go to the next. Now, one of the important things about NEP is we are putting too many things into the NEP, but at the same time, are we giving the teachers? We have come from the education system prior to the NEP, most of us. How do you prepare this teacher who has been trained in an education system prior to the NEP to teach NEP requirements, to adjust to the NEP requirement, and to orient himself to the NEP goals? And that is where probably you need to talk about the 21st century, very euphemistically called 21st century because that's when we started implementing the NEP. And here are some of the skills, the global, it's not the Indian system, it is the global collective that has marked these skills. I think the Vice-Chancellor was asking about developing these skills and how EFLU can help, particularly in some skills, to many of the universities, and we are focusing on that. EFLU's strength, or EFLU's USP is that EFLU develops pedagogies. EFLU is keen to listen to the current trends and bring them into pedagogies. The reason why the proficiency courses that EFLU takes up, those proficiency courses are much sought after because they are updated and up to the current requirement. So we have teachers who address these aspects, okay, the 21st century skills, which are very, very important. I think they are there. And next. Yeah, this is another, the professional ethics and how they change. Next. This is the evolution of higher education in India, right from 1948. If you see and this evolution indirectly, in a different way, supports the NEP. In the sense, one commission, the results of one commission do not go with the next commission. And because of the gaps between the objectives of different bodies set up right from 1948, the fragmentation and the segmentation has taken place. NEP took care not to go this way, rather make a clean break. So this is one of the aspects that we need to tell maybe next. So flexibility. I just will tell you flexibility and SQF and probably wind up. I hope I have time for about 5 minutes more. Flexibility, if you see, there is a sentence in NEP, light but tight. Very, very interesting sentence. Light but tight. If it is light, how is it tight? And if it is tight, how is it light? The flexibility is truly there in NEP. And those of us who have implemented, those of us who are discovering the paths for the implementation of the NEP, we know that. If you see the flexibility is there in terms of the course induction, the course levels, and one of the important things that NEP does is, I think most of us who have come up with a very rigid system. Somebody who is in science, he cannot touch history, social science. When we were students, that rigidity used to be there. But now, maybe mostly like US system, one is a physics major, he can study history or political science or even music. So that is one kind of flexibility. The second kind of flexibility, if you are an engineer, earlier, it would be difficult for you to come to a BA or MA stream, but now it is possible. This is possible because of two things: that institutionally you can migrate, disciplinary way you can migrate, and in terms of courses also you can migrate. The only thing that you have common is the credit bank. You have to have this much of credit to get a degree, and you acquire those credits, you will get it. So that is the only common thing, otherwise the rest is all flexible. In other words, the learner is put at the center of this system. So the system has been made flexible so that the learner learns or develops competences across the disciplines, and maybe that will help him to address the current problems, current issues. I think academic bank of credits and all, I think all of you know, I think you are a university, so I will, yeah, next. This is the capacity building. I think MMT takes care of these aspects. There are a number of things, and Vice-Chancellor is sitting, I think, Vice-Chancellors are sitting and former Vice-Chancellors are sitting. This is a challenge for us. Given the few number of teachers that we have to keep sending them to MMT capacity building programs. And it is very, very important that we send, otherwise they won't, live up to the requirement of the new courses and new programs. Yeah, next. Yeah, this could be my last slide. And this is developed by one expert, by the skills mentor of Professor Elsie. I have borrowed this slide from him, and he talks about how the skill architecture is merged into the mainstream, and this will explain in many ways the skill architecture and how the skill courses are planned and merged at levels, not anyway or not across, but at levels. Okay, and that's mentioned there clearly. I think I will stop here. If you all think there is something we can discuss, I'm open to that. Thank you, organizers, for your kind words. Thank you.
Any questions? So nice to know that EFLU produces pedagogies. That's one important point. That is very important, sir, because pedagogy is the most important thing in NJP also. And the other example that you have given, the conversation between the difference between deaf, dumb, and gentleman. Who is literate, who is not literate. That is a very good comparison. It's an eye-opener for many of us. It's a very good, the way that we perceive things in daily life, that's very important on both sides. So,
plurilingualism.
Open and for discussion for all the academicians. Sir, you have done the job, sir, very well. You have left an important note that government listens to industries more than the institutions. That is an important note, sir. We have to conduct so many deliberations, brainstorming sessions, and go to turn out brains to come out with an idea which can balance all these three things, sir. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, sir, for your enlightening the gathering with a lot of teaching and learning strategies, and also the suggestions related to national education policy as well as the communication skills improvement.